I really want a Nintendo Switch 2, but it has a huge problem and it's getting harder to ignore. Third-party support is strong, but third-party sales are in the gutter. Gamers are fuming over the train wreck that we are watching happen in slow motion. And the worst part is, this train wreck has absolutely nothing to do with the quality of the games, but is, in fact, almost made worse by the fact that we do want to play and support them, and it all has to do with one huge issue: game key cards. But I'm not just here to complain about game key cards, I'm here to offer solutions. It's 2014, and you are Nintendo. Things are looking very rough at this point in time. We're 3 years into the life cycle of the Wii U, and the writing is on the wall. Now legendary president of Nintendo, Satoru Iwata, famously cut his salary in half in a response to the poor sales. In a Hail Mary move, Nintendo pivoted mid-cycle to clear the drawing board and start over from scratch. Now fast forward to 2017. The Nintendo Switch has proven to be a breakout success. The console used relatively inexpensive components such as the NVIDIA Tegra X1 and SoC from 2015, a middle-of-the-road 720p display, flash storage, and suspect analog sticks on the Joy-Con controllers. The console effectively consolidated Nintendo's first and third-party development from two different systems, a console and a handheld system, into a singular juggernaut of unprecedented support. In hindsight, we can see that this was a brilliant move, launching Nintendo back into relevance in a big way. That NVIDIA Tegra X1 mobile system on a chip would be 10 years old when it would be preceded by the Nintendo Switch 2. Which is not to say that the games weren't fun or that the support waned during that time frame. Development and publication of games only became cheaper over time as the flash storage of the SD card style technology matured to a point of costing pennies to produce what used to take dollars. Nintendo, of course, made every single release look incredible though. The first party support was industry leading, showing the world how to make incredible looking games by focusing on the gameplay and aesthetic rather than just pushing for higher levels of realism. Meanwhile, the Switch had an incredibly friendly indie program. All of this is to say, we just lived through a moment in time where all cylinders were firing for Nintendo, and sailing has been smooth. However, game key cards are an iceberg in the waters ahead, and the Switch 2 still has time to adjust its course, but they must act soon. Game key cards, or GKCs, look like regular game cartridges but are cheaper to produce because functionally they're just a voucher. You go to the store, you buy a game in a box that looks not too dissimilar from a standard game, you take it home, you plug it into your Switch 2, and your console downloads the game from an online server. You can hand that cartridge off to a friend and they can download and play the game, or you could sell it. When viewed that way, you could mistake this for a step forward in terms of digital game ownership, but unfortunately, this is only half of the story, because this approach also comes with the worst of both worlds attached. Games downloaded from the online stores using a GKC lives on your console's storage as long as it's installed. It takes up a chunk of that space, and you cannot use that space to store your other digital games. However, you cannot access and play the game without inserting the cartridge, so you're foregoing the only real convenience of a digitally downloaded game. And you're also still contributing all the same amount of plastics and waste into the world from the production and distribution of shipping and manufacturing as if you were buying the physical game. You're also likely relinquishing the longevity of physical media. Remember, these are just IOUs that let you download games from a server, and Nintendo's track record for keeping servers available is suspect. The original Wii Shop, for instance, was discontinued in 2019. Purchased games can still be re-downloaded, but the official Nintendo site states that these features will eventually end. As someone who regularly plays 35-year-old Nintendo Entertainment System cartridges, can I still expect to be able to do the same thing on a Switch 2 GKC in another 35 years? Personally, I'm not counting on it. So GKC's bad, right? Just don't buy them, right? No, actually. When I heard about this, my first thoughts were, and still are to an extent, that there is potential upsides to game key cards when they're leveraged to empower consumers. There are certain games that are constantly under development and constantly evolving. These are typically called something like live service games, and it makes sense that if you're gonna have to download the entire updated code base every time you play the game anyway, you may as well save time and money using the much cheaper GKCs and pass that savings along to the customer. Other games are exclusively played online, MMO games like Final Fantasy XIV, for instance, your access to playing these games is already dependent upon a server being available to play on, so you may as well download your client at the same time. After all, when that one goes down, the cartridge effectively becomes e-waste regardless, right? And at least in the meantime, players have the ability to sell the game to somebody else. Of course, in the case of Final Fantasy XIV and other MMOs, there are still subscription fees involved, and paying for such a cartridge on top of that would just be downright silly. There can be pro-consumer ways of using these kinds of licensing, but that's not how the game key cards are being used right now. Single-player, offline, narrative-driven experience and most other third-party titles are releasing on the Nintendo Switch 2 exclusively on GKCs. Why is that? This concept isn't unique to the Nintendo Switch 2. There have been codes on discs for consoles generations now. Why is this such a bigger issue for the Nintendo Switch 2 suddenly? The TLDR is corporations are gonna hike the price up to $70 to cover the cost of publishing a real Switch cartridge. Then they're gonna skip eating that cost altogether once they realize you'll still pay full price for a GKC. AA titles will also be incentivized to go with a GKC because the difference in publishing costs could nearly fund the development of a whole other game at that level. And indies are effectively priced out of physical releases on Switch 2 altogether because the cheapest options available right now wouldn't even let them break even, and that feels like a huge stab in the back for indies in particular because the Switch 1 was a real popular destination for indie physical releases. The cartridges could be produced in smaller batches and still be profitable even though the cost per cartridge was high. That's because while pressing a single disc is super cheap, you've got upfront costs, which is a small cost for big corporations to make, but one that is insurmountable for many indies. In the world of consumer rights to own things that we've purchased, this is just one more degree up on the stove as this frog continues to come up to boiling temp. We will own nothing and we will like it. Ubisoft says that gamers will just have to get used to not owning games, and while Nintendo didn't make that statement themselves, their actions are becoming the driving force behind it. The backlash to game key cards has been loud enough, though, that Nintendo appears to be re-evaluating its approach, or at least gathering data on the discomfort. In July of 2025, reports emerged that Nintendo of Japan sent out surveys asking if players were aware of GKCs and whether they owned any, and crucially, whether they would opt for a digital download version of a game if a physical copy was available as a game key card. Early this month, August 2025 that is, Nintendo of America briefly opened a wider survey and notably included a question specifically about physical games featuring a digital download. Many have filled out this survey with passionate responses, including myself. Interestingly, this particular survey was taken down early, deactivated shortly after going live. Nintendo didn't give a reason, but its sudden closure led to speculation that perhaps the responses were overwhelming or skewed in a way that Nintendo didn't expect or didn't like. And it's possible that Nintendo got the data that they needed quickly or decided to limit the PR exposure of this survey since its existence basically admitted that there is in fact some kind of controversy going on. A report from The Gaming Business looked into data from Nielsen and Circana, and the numbers painted a pretty bleak picture, including the fact that in the first week, nearly 90% of Switch 2 physical games sales in the UK were first-party games. And when you adjust those numbers to exclude Mario Kart World from the bundled games, it's still nearly half of all games sold were still just Nintendo selling first-party games, despite a significant amount of third-party support at launch, that is. We can't really know how much of a role GKCs played in all of that, but I suspect that the survey Nintendo pulled recently has given them some food for thought. One possibility that has been floated by fans like myself is for Nintendo to introduce more cartridge options. While it's tempting to say, just allow lower sizes, that may not have the impact on costs as much as you might think. The new high-speed flash just has an inherent base cost to manufacture, and size differences won't likely contribute hugely in one way or the other. Otherwise, Nintendo probably would have jumped at it by now, but here's my spin on the solution. Consider instead allowing smaller games to be using older Switch 1 cartridge tech, which is slower and lower capacity. Indie games in particular, which are often very lightweight and rarely suffer from load times regardless, would benefit hugely from this option, bringing publication costs on Switch 2 way down, nearly down to Switch 1 costs, while relying on a very mature technology. This would allow Nintendo to reserve the new high-speed carts for games that truly need them. The Switch 2 slot can read Switch 1 cartridges since the system is backwards compatible, so in theory, a new game could be published using Switch 1 technology. It should still be able to run normally with just like a simple firmware update. And if Nintendo is concerned about messaging and consistency and perhaps having these budget cartridge options sullying its perceived performance of Nintendo Switch 2 games, they could make it perfectly clear by color coding their cartridges or maybe bringing back the Nintendo seal of quality. Maybe make them the dark gray color of a Switch 1 game, for instance, or maybe a white one. Nintendo has yet to indicate any kind of support for this idea, and it may have technical or marketing downsides, but it's an idea born out of a desire to see physical media used in a more pro-consumer and pro-developer way. Why force an indie game that's only 3 gigs to either pay for a 64 gig super fast cartridge or be a download code in a box? Why not just allow a legacy 8 gig cartridge or 4 gig cartridge that might be far cheaper? Well, Nintendo's perceptions of a certain third-party cartridge device may be clouding their judgment here. Nintendo's reluctance to allow more flexibility with cartridge media may be partly due to the security concerns exemplified by the Switch cartridge saga. The company likely viewed these high-speed cards and the GKC mechanism as an opportunity to sort of reset the security environment for the Switch 2 software without breaking the highly demanded backwards compatibility. Unfortunately, that approach leaves honest consumers stuck with the downsides that I've been discussing with you. It's a classic case of anti-piracy measures inconveniencing legitimate customers more than the pirates. It's still clear that the game key cards are a half measure that pleases almost nobody. Many gamers have decided on principle to not support GKC releases, effectively boycotting them, even if it means not buying certain third-party games or even a Switch 2 at all. Most of the time when someone says vote with your wallet though, I die a little inside. Not because gamers are bad at boycotting things, but because we're not a monolith. We have different priorities. Some of us embrace the digital trend. Why the heck would they join a boycott like this? Other people simply don't know or care, and some would rather support their favorite developers no matter what. But usually when someone says vote with your wallets, it's in the context where there are very few or no alternatives. Oh, you don't like your internet company, huh? Well, go vote with your wallet. Oh, you don't like that your favorite game series is flirting with gacha? Vote with your wallet. Oh, your software charges crazy subscription fees? You get it. It's such a useless phrase at this point, they may as well be saying, go away, I don't want to think about it, it is not my problem, and you can't make me care. It's a cop-out. But for this one thing, this one time, we might actually have a shot. Because so far, nearly every third-party title coming to the Nintendo Switch 2 is also coming to another console or has already been there on a real disc. Instead of boycotting the third-party games that we want to buy and enjoy, we can just play them on other consoles. Publishers will absolutely notice if their GKCs underperform relative to expectations. Nintendo will notice if third-party support or sales figures suffer. The company's recent surveys and public statements hint that they are already noticing, and that means it might already just be working. And with the recent amount of attention coming to the Stop Killing Games initiative, there would never be a better time than now for gamers and developers and publishers and Nintendo to start taking steps to solidify a pro-consumer alternative for long-term game ownership. Single-player or standalone games have no place being tied to an online service for basic functionality. If a game can be made to run offline, it should be delivered on a cartridge that contains all of its data. Anything less is shortchanging the customer. Nintendo could also explore hybrid solutions, such as a cartridge that uses the proprietary and safe game key card technology as a checksum and handshake key for the content of a Switch 2 cartridge that contains normal Switch 1 flash chips for bulk storage. And that's just an idea I thought of in a day. Nintendo, you have smarter people working for you than me. Case in point. You can make something better. And you need to. Because as good as Nintendo is at making first-party games, that didn't save the Wii U from its early demise. Third-party support isn't optional, and neither is support, trust, and goodwill from gamers. These things are foundational, and damn it, I want to buy a Switch 2. Even after all of this, I've been wanting a Switch Pro since forever, and this is effectively exactly that, but with some extra Switch 2 baggage that right now somehow only serves to sour the experience. The last two Nintendo events highlighting the partner games coming to GameKey cards and the games from the Indie Showcase only twist the knife. I'm not going to say that I'll never buy a Switch 2. The Switch Pro functionality is just too damn alluring to me right now, and I acknowledge that. But you can rest assured that anything put on a GameKey card, I will buy on any other platform but yours. And that sucks for both of us. And as for you watching at home, if we don't push back, the future of gaming could look like a shelf full of plastic shells with nothing inside them. A hollow echo of what gaming used to be.